Don't I have the right to do what I want with my own money? That's not a libertarian slogan. That's not some Bitcoin maximalist arguing on the internet. That's Jesus Christ telling a parable about the kingdom of heaven. Most people hear this parable and think it's about God being generous, and it is. But there's a question buried in it that gets overlooked. A question about sovereignty, about generosity, and about who gets to decide what you do with what's yours. And in 2022, a government answered that question for thousands of its own citizens by freezing their bank accounts. But we'll get to that. First, let me show you what Jesus actually said and why it starts with a conversation most people don't realize happened right before this parable. Matthew chapter 19 leads directly into Matthew 20. In the original text, there's no chapter break. It's one conversation. A rich young ruler walks up to Jesus and asks, "What must I do to get eternal life?" Jesus tells him to keep the commandments. The man says he's done all that since he was a boy. So Jesus says, "If you want to be perfect, go, sell your possessions and give it to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. Then come, follow me." The man walks away sad. He had great wealth. Now Peter, who was never shy about anything, he jumps in immediately. "We've left everything to follow you. What then will there be for us?" You hear, right? The entitlement. I got here first. I gave up more. I deserve more. Jesus reassures him, "You'll receive 100 times as much." But then he adds something strange. "Many who are first will be last, and many who are last will be first." And without a pause, he tells this parable. This is Jesus' answer to Peter's sense of entitlement. Let me tell you a story about a vineyard. Here's what Jesus said. Matthew chapter 20, verses 1 through 16. "For the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire workers for his vineyard. He agreed to pay them a denarius for the day and sent them into his vineyard. A denarius, a Roman silver coin, about 4 grams of real silver, a full day's wage for a laborer, enough to feed a family. This was real money, not a token. The landowner goes out again at 9 in the morning and finds others standing in the marketplace with nothing to do. He tells them, 'You also go and work in my vineyard, and I will pay you whatever is right.' They went. He goes out again at noon, again at 3, and again at 5 in the evening, just 1 hour before quitting time, and finds still more workers standing idle. 'Why have you been standing here all day long doing nothing?' 'Because no one has hired us.' 'You also go and work in my vineyard.' Now, notice something. The dawn workers got a contract. He agreed to pay them a denarius. Clear terms, voluntary. Both sides shook on it. But the later workers? No fixed price. I will pay you whatever is right. They didn't negotiate. They trusted him. That's not a transaction. That's faith. The ones who trusted were content. The ones who calculated were bitter. When evening comes, the landowner tells his foreman, 'Call the workers and pay them their wages, beginning with the last ones hired and going on to the first.' The 5 o'clock workers step forward. Each one receives a denarius, a full day's wage for 1 hour of work. The dawn workers see this, and they start doing math. If the latecomers got a denarius, surely we'll get more. We've been here since sunrise. We bore the heat of the day. But each one of them also receives a denarius, and they begin to grumble. 'You have made them equal to us who have borne the burden of the work and the heat of the day.' The landowner looks at one of them and says 3 things, 3 devastating lines. First, 'Didn't you agree to work for a denarius? The contract was honored. You got exactly what you were promised. Second, don't I have the right to do what I want with my own money? Sovereignty, absolute, unapologetic sovereignty. Third, Are you envious because I am generous? And there it is, the real issue. Not injustice, envy. Not a broken promise, resentment of someone else's generosity. So the last will be first, and the first will be last. Before we go any further, before we talk about sovereignty and money and what happened in 2022, I need to honor what this parable is actually about. The landowner is God. This is a parable about the kingdom of heaven, and the primary teaching in every Christian tradition is that salvation is a gift, not a wage, not something you earn by getting in line first or working harder than everyone else. Grace. The dawn workers represent people who think they've earned God's favor through long service. The late workers represent those who come to faith later in life, or from unexpected places. And God gives the same grace to both. That's the heart of this parable. If you take nothing else from this video, take this. God's generosity is not proportional to your resume. It's radical, it's sovereign, and it's freely given. But look at how God operates in the story. He keeps his promises. The dawn workers get exactly what he said. He is radically generous. The late workers received far more than they earned. He is sovereign. Don't I have the right? Is God's asserting authority over his own kingdom. He invites everyone. He goes out 5 times. 5. Nobody is left standing idle if he can help it. And he is personal. He doesn't send a foreman with the paychecks. He pays them himself, face to face. Now here's something worth sitting with. God didn't model sovereignty so he could hoard it. He modeled it so we could steward it. When he entrusted us with resources, he gave us the same kind of authority to keep our word, to be generous, to decide freely what to do with what he's given us. I'm not claiming that human property rights are identical to divine sovereignty, but God chose to illustrate his kingdom using voluntary exchange, honored agreements, and sovereign generosity. And that tells us something about how he designed stewardship to work. Bitcoin didn't invent financial sovereignty. God did. Bitcoin is one tool that helps restore what the modern financial system has taken away. Now, most sermons stop right there. God is generous, be grateful, the end. And that's a complete true message. But there's a line in verse 15 that almost no one preaches on. The landowner looks at the complainers and asks, "Don't I have the right to do what I want with my own money?" Let's talk about what happens when that right is taken away. That instinct from the dawn workers, you shouldn't be allowed to do that with your property, is the same instinct that shows up wherever someone tries to control what another person does with what's theirs. In the parable, Jesus rebukes it. He sided with the sovereign owner, not with those who wanted to regulate his generosity. And that rebuke echoes far beyond the vineyard. If you're thinking this sounds more political than biblical, Jesus is the one who asked the question. Not a politician, not an economist. The sovereignty of the landowner isn't a political position. It's a reflection of God's own character. In the original Greek, the phrase translated, "my own money," is even broader than it sounds. It's en toi et moi, literally, in what is mine. Not just his coins, everything, his vineyard, his wages, his choices, an absolute claim of ownership. Some of you are thinking about Romans 13, submit to the governing authorities. We take that seriously. Romans 13 describes authorities that punish evil and reward good. When a government punishes generosity, that's a different conversation. And we go deep on it in our Render Unto Caesar playlist. For now, let me show you what I mean. In 2022, Canadian truckers protested vaccine mandates. Reasonable people disagreed about the protest itself, and that's not what this video is about. What happened next is, thousands of ordinary citizens wanted to help. They donated. Crowdfunding platforms raised millions and then canceled the campaigns. Bank accounts were frozen without court orders. The generosity was shut down. One woman donated $250. Her name was leaked online. She received death threats. She was called a Nazi. She was forced to close her business. $250 of generosity, and her life was turned upside down. Whatever your view of the protest, should a government be able to freeze your bank account for making a legal donation without a court order? A federal court later ruled those freezes unconstitutional. But there was one channel they couldn't shut down. A pseudonymous Bitcoiner who went by Nobody Caribou raised Bitcoin from thousands of donors, printed Bitcoin wallets, and went trucker to trucker in the cold, handing out envelopes by hand. No bank, no middleman. No one could say no. By the time the government moved to freeze crypto wallets, the majority of the Bitcoin had already been delivered, person to person. The landowner paid his workers directly, face to face, with no intermediary. That principle didn't disappear. 2,000 years later, Nobody Caribou found a way to deliver generosity the same way, person to person, using the only money that couldn't be shut down. Here's the principle the parable teaches, in 2022 illustrated. You cannot be generous if you are not sovereign. The landowner's generosity to the late workers was only possible because he had full control of his property. If a regulatory body had stepped in and said, "You must pay proportionally to hours worked," the late workers would have gotten a fraction of a denarius, and some of them might have gone home hungry that night. When your money can be frozen for donating to the wrong cause, you can't give freely. When your bank flags a charitable transfer as suspicious, you can't give freely. When your government decides which generosity is allowed and which is not, you aren't generous. You're compliant. Take away the sovereignty, and you take away the generosity. Bitcoin isn't perfect. It's not a spiritual solution. It's a tool. It's volatile, and it's not always easy to spend locally if you want to buy something today rather than save for the future. Many of the truckers who received those envelopes didn't know how to use Bitcoin, and converting it to local currency wasn't easy. Where Bitcoin shines is generosity across borders, supporting a missionary in a country with no banking rail, helping a family in a nation with a collapsed currency, sending aid directly without middlemen lining their pockets along the way. For that, it's the best tool we have right now. But the principle matters more than the tool. If something better comes along tomorrow, the principle still stands. Sovereignty enables generosity. In our very first video, we said this channel would always put God first and Bitcoin second. So let me leave you with this. The landowner in this parable is a picture of God, a God who keeps his promises, who is radically generous, who is sovereign over everything that's his. And when he entrusted stewardship to us, he gave us the same freedom, the freedom to keep our word, the freedom to be generous, the freedom to do what we want with what he's given us. Don't let anyone take that from you. In the lost coin, we said sound money has dignity, that something worth searching for is worth protecting. This parable takes it further. It's not enough to find what's valuable. You need the freedom to do something with it. That's what this playlist is about. Jesus told parable after parable about money, truth, value, and generosity. And every one of them points to the same thing. Money should be honest. Agreements should be voluntary. And sovereignty over what's yours is a gift from God, not a privilege granted by governments. Jesus said it in Matthew 6:33. Seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. And if you're a pastor watching this, if even one idea in this video gave you a new way to think about money, sovereignty, or generosity, imagine what it could do for your congregation. Share it. Let's have the conversation. We've got 11 more playlists coming. prophecy, honest weights, stewardship, freedom, and a whole lot more. I'm Patrick, and this is the Gospel of Bitcoin.